Здравствуйте. Знаете, мне кажется, что такой гость, как у нас сегодня, это просто что-то невероятное. И я очень-очень признательна, что в «Зелёной» гостиной Большого театра с нами сегодня сидит Марсия Хайде. Вот слово «великая» редко употребляешь, но в данном случае, наверное, можно сказать. Это великая балерина 20 века, перешедшая с нами в 21 век, настоящая звезда, женщина с удивительной карьерой. И я настолько признательна, что она сегодня с нами в студии. Вы родились в Бразилии. Мне всегда это интересно. Вы родились в Бразилии. Откуда вообще возникло желание заниматься классическим балетом? И когда вы поняли про себя, что это должно стать вашей судьбой?
Well, my grandfather always told me that when I was 3 years old, whenever he put music on the radio, I start dancing. I start moving around. I think I was born to dance. It's everything that I always wanted to do, and I really believe that I came to this world just to dance. And when I was also about 4 or 5 years old, my mother put me in a school for children, and one of the teachers, she gave dance. She put music, and she made steps for us. And I think that's when I realized that I wanted to dance, and I never stopped. And very small, I used to tell my mother, I want to be the greatest ballerina in the world, and I'm never going to get married and not have children. I just want to dance. I was already 5 or 6. So that means that it was in me, it was in my blood. I wanted to just...
Вот сейчас в Джонвилле есть школа Большого театра. На самом деле, единственная школа Большого, которая работает за рубежом. Но ведь тогда же ничего такого не было. Где можно было научиться классическому балету?
Well, you know that the ballet russe, the Basile, they traveled to South America. And they left many dancers there. Like my teacher, Václav Velček, he was Czech, but he had the complete Russian school. Tatiana Leskova, Madame Egorova, they were all in Brazil. We had always from beginning those fantastic teachers that they chose to stay. As dancers, they stayed in South America, they stayed in Brazil.
А вот это мадам Егорова, я думаю, это Любовь Егорова в Париже, это другая Егорова.
Was a different one. I also took classes with Egorova in Paris, with Preobrazhenska in Paris. I always had a feeling for the Russian teachers. And somehow the Russian teachers that I had in my life, I also worked with Volkova, I worked with Karsavina. When I was in London, very young, I took mime scenes with Karsavina. And all the Russians, they always loved me. The English teachers, they never liked me very much. They didn't like my style. They thought that I was I was too free, I wasn't enough controlled for their taste. But the Russian teachers, they were the biggest part of my life.
Красавина, Карсавина, Преображенская, Егорова, для нас это все большие имена. Вы с ними работали. Можете несколько слов сказать, чем они все отличались?
Well, one thing they had similar, and that for me is the point of all the Russian teachers. They give class, they talk to you, they teach you not only with their heads telling what they know, but with the heart. You feel that. For them it's important not that you know exactly just what you're doing, but how you're doing. You know, the way you place your arm. Volkova used to say to me, Marcia, don't ever forget, you have pink air under your arm, so don't squeeze it. You always have to be like this. Otherwise, you're squeezing, destroying that beautiful pink air. So that's one thing that they all had in common. And the difference that they had was in choosing how to build the training. Each one had their own way. Also, I one of my great teachers was Bezobrazova in Monte Carlo. When I started dancing with Rudolf Nureyev, she was the one that really took care of me many years. So I always had a tendency for the Russians. And I always ask myself why I was born in Brazil and not in Russia, you know?
А как вы решили покинуть Бразилию, оставить родителей, всех? Это было страшно?
No. But I didn't decide. My whole life, actually, I never decided. Well, I decided, but the things were put in front of me. And it came something in front of me, and I said, okay, I take it. Then, sir, I take it. And that's how my life was as if my life was prepared, you know? And in the certain moments of my life, certain things appeared, and I took, and that's what made my career. That's what made what I am today.
Тогда расскажите, как в вашу жизнь вошел Джон Cranko и как вы решили за него схватиться?
Well, first I tell you how I left Brazil, because I left Brazil. Have you ever seen that film, The Red Shoes, with Michael Powell? Well, Michael Powell was going through Rio de Janeiro. He was looking for talent. And my cousin was a great actress, Bibi Ferreira. And Bibi Ferreira was a friend of Michael Powell. So when Michael Powell came to Rio, she phoned my mother and she said, why don't you make a dinner and I bring Michael Powell, because she knew that I loved the Red Shoes. So there he came that night, and I couldn't speak English. I was only speaking Portuguese, and I was just looking at him like this, you know. And he was there the whole night, and he kept really looking at me, really looking. 2 months later, I get a letter from Arnold Haskell in the at that time was the Sadlerswells school, and invited me to come to the school. And I said to my mother, I'm going. And my mother says, yes, you are going. And she took me there. And that's how I came to Europe. It's not that I was planning to make my career in Europe, but the life brought me to Europe. And then from the school, I did 2.5 years with the school. They said, well, now you're ready to go to a company. And Nicholas Beryozov said, the best company for you would be the Marquis de Cuevas. So then I joined the Marquis de Cuevas, and the Marquis was a very extraordinary man. And he always used to bring talents to choreograph in his company. And one of them was John Cranko. John Cranko was already starting to build his career in London. And he brought John to the Marquis. And when John came in, I was already looking at him like this. He didn't choose me for his ballet, but I was in every rehearsal. And I was looking at him. And it fascinated me, the way that Cranko had to work with dancers. You know, he didn't have a style. Cranko didn't like a style. Cranko wanted a freedom of movement. And he discovered the choreography with the dancers. The dancers really were part of what he created. And I was fascinated. The ballet that he did for the Marquis de Cuevas was the biggest flop in Paris. When he came to bow, and he was standing there all by himself, and that whole house was screaming, boo! I felt so sorry for him, you know. But he just stood there, stick up his neck and smile, and he left for London. And then when the Marquis died, I didn't want anymore to stay in that company. And I heard that Cranko had gone to Germany. So I phoned, and Cranko said, well, you must come quickly because I still have some contracts. And I went to Stuttgart. I did a class with him, and Cranko, great choreographer, very bad teacher. He used in class to make choreography. So he really used to put steps together that you really thought, oh my God, what I never did this, and the arms in strange positions, but he loved that. And there was one diagonal that he did that it was so complicated that the whole company was just looking, was his company, was just looking and didn't know what to do. And he looked at me and said, you. So I put myself as first. And I was always very quick to learn, no? So the music started, I threw myself and I went and I finished. And after he said to me, tomorrow you do an audition in front of on stage for the chef of the theater. That was Professor Schaefer. And I thought, that's very difficult to have to put, he put me in a tutu and a crown and all made up, and there I was on stage doing, he had rehearsed me in a pas de deux from Sleeping Beauty and 2 variations from Beauty, and he let me loose on stage. And there I was in that huge theater with just him sitting out front with the chef from the whole theater, no? And doing all that. After he said, go to the dressing room and wait for me. And I waited 1 hour, 2 hours. And then he came like this and says, okay, I got you the contract for my prima ballerina. I was doing for the Stuttgart Ballet. And the director of the theater said to him, why do you want her? She doesn't have personality. She's not known. Why do you want her? And he says, because she understands me. Because of that diagonal, that nobody else could grasp what he wanted. And I threw myself and did, maybe not perfect, but I understood what he wanted. That's how I joined that's where my career began, with Cranko.
Ну и одна из первых работ, достаточно рано, наверное, в вашей карьере, была «Ромео и Джульетта». Но он когда-то ставил ведь это раньше в Италии, в 1959 году. Вот насколько вместе с вами создавался образ Джульетты?
Oh, very much. I don't think John could ever create something without really making for the person. Like if he was going to do Romeo and Juliet for you, after the Juliet he did for me, would be totally different because he would take it from you. For John, what was important wasn't to create ballets, he wanted to have a company and he wanted to create his own stars. Because he created me and Richard Craig and Birgit Kyle, Egon Madsen. We were the 4 initials, the initials that were his initials. Then many others, but those 4 were the center of the Stuttgart Ballet, at the beginning of the Stuttgart Ballet. And the Romeo and Juliet that he did for me was totally different than the one that he had done for Carla Fracci. Because years later we invited Carla to come and dance, and she really had to relearn everything. The pas de deux were different, everything.
А вы помните, как влияла на него и на вас музыка Прокофьева?
I think that the first thing that was influential to Cranko, that's not that I think, I know, was Lavrovsky. Romeo and Juliet, and Ulanova. No, that was for him the first, he really had a love for that piece. So when he created, it's not that he wanted to copy Lavrovsky because it was totally different, a different world for him. But that was the beginning for him, and Prokofiev, because Prokofiev, it's a masterpiece. You know, that ballet, Romeo and Juliet, the story, the music, it alone, it's a masterpiece. Just to listen to the music is fantastic. And for me, I can't say that was the music that influenced me. For me, it was Cranko. You know, I remember the first rehearsal when we started at the balcony. He comes in, he sits down, I'm there, and I understood now, why the choreographers, they all wanted to work with me. It's not that maybe I was such a I became a great dancer because they made me. I always danced something that was created for me, was created on my body. And that's a present that nobody has, because most times you have to do the Swan Lake that was done for this, or you had to do like now they're doing Onegin, but Onegin was done on me. To have a creation for me was the most important thing. That's why I still today, with 76, I still have a career, because choreographers still want me sometimes just to walk on stage. And for me it's as important to walk on stage. If I had to just walk the whole ballet, just walk and cross the stage, is as important as doing Tatiana or doing Juliet, because it's to be on stage. It's to be with the choreographer. If a choreographer says to me today, sit down and don't move for 2 hours, I sit down and I don't move for 2 hours, but is to be that somebody wants still to do something for me was always the great joy in my life.
Ну и что же там было в сцене балкона?
Yes, what I said is that because I was there and I had no idea what was going to come. I knew what the balcony was. But then he had a very special way, to work. And he just looked at me and my Romeo, that was Ray, and he looked and said, okay, Ray, this part here is just you for the variation. But now, Marcia, you come in. You come in the balcony and you are only thinking about Romeo. You just walk in and you think about Romeo, you look at the moon, you are on top of this balcony, and then Romeo comes in and picks you. So that's how the whole thing was created. John didn't know the steps that he was going to do, but he was so clear in the situation, how to build that situation. And for me and for Ray, was whatever he said, we immediately did. And sometimes was different than what he wanted, but he says, oh no, this is better, let's keep that.
А как возникла идея ставить Онегина? Почему? Откуда это получилось?
Well, Onegin wasn't for us, wasn't for the Stuttgart Ballet. Onegin, Cranko wanted to do it for the Royal Ballet with Rudolf Nureyev as Onegin, Margot Fontaine as Tatiana, Antoinette Sibley as Olga, and Anthony Dowell as Lenski. And he went to the Royal Ballet with the project, and they said to him, sorry, we don't know. I don't think that's going to be a success, because there is a very famous opera, Onegin, you can't do a ballet. So he came back to Stuttgart, and he said, okay, children, let's do it us here. But his first original idea was to have had Rudolf Nureyev as Onegin. And if he had had Rudolf Nureyev as Onegin and Fontaine as Tatiana, the ballet would have been totally different, because at that time, Nureyev was at the prime of his career. Fontaine was already fading. And when in Stuttgart, my partner that did Onegin, he was already in a stage in which he had a problem with Achilles tendon, so he couldn't do much. He was a fantastic partner, but the solo, if you see Onegin, Onegin has one solo in the whole ballet, and that's very, that's not Cranko, because Cranko liked to create for men. If he had done for Nureyev, then it would have been Onegin, because the whole thing would have been concentrated on him. But when he came, then the whole thing was more concentrated. Tatiana does all the dancing. Onegin does the acting, he had his solo, all the partnering, and Lenski has the dancing. And I think that he was very lucky that he didn't create for the Royal Ballet, because it became the masterpiece that it is today.
А как вы готовились к роли Татьяны? Вы читали Пушкина?
Well, first of all, I read Pushkin after Cranko did for me, because I was Cranko's Tatiana, not Pushkin Tatiana. If Cranko wanted his Tatiana to be different than what Pushkin, how Pushkin was imagining his Tatiana, then I was going to be Cranko's. So I always put myself first in what he wanted. And then after that, he took me to see a film. There was a film about Onegin in Stuttgart, was in Russian, I remember, was singing, was the opera, but the characters were not opera singers. It was a film that was, you know,
Yes.
and I remember the Tatiana, she had white skin, black hair, and this long hair with a braid, no, here. And he just said to me, "That's how I want Tatiana." And I think for all the things that Cranko created for me, the one that from beginning I had difference with Cranko was with Tatiana, because for me Tatiana was, she was older than her age. She was interested in reading. She was very romantic. She was very quiet. And Cranko, what he wanted me to do on stage was, he said, "You like a young horse. You don't really know still how," you understand? He made that comparison of how a horse starts walking or how he gets up. And that for me was very difficult, made my interpretation of Tatiana the first time that I did difficult, because I was trying to be what John wanted, but at the same time, in my own head, I had a different feeling for it. And when we first did Onegin, the critics were very, very bad in Stuttgart. And John said, "Oh, I don't think, let's take out of the repertoire." And I went to him and I said, "No way, because we've worked so much in that. The public loved, but there was one critic that really destroyed Onegin." And I said, "No way. I mean, I want to do at least for 1 year, John. I have to find my role. I want to dance this ballet that you created." And he said, "Okay." And then we stopped doing Onegin for a while. And then came 2 years later, Heinz Klaus. Heinz Klaus was a beautiful German dancer. And John saw something on him and said, "Okay, let's redo Onegin." And that's when Onegin became what it is today. Had many changes, Onegin, had many phases. At the beginning, we used to have a prologue in Onegin that was taken. Tatiana used to bring 2 children that she had with Grammy. But certain things that after that he saw on the stage, he says, "No, it doesn't work." So Onegin was not like Romeo. Romeo he did, and from the beginning was perfect, didn't change anything. Damien of the Shrew from beginning was perfect. But that Onegin had a different path, no? A different way. And only after is that it really became the masterpiece, because it's perfect. The way Cranko finally got the Onegin together, as it is today, it's a masterpiece.
А для вас вот характер Татьяны просто очень интересно, потому что мы сейчас ставим эту работу. Я думаю, всем нашим артистам будет очень интересно услышать, что вы думаете. Вот Татьяна как характер, когда она видит Онегина, что ее так поражает в нем, и когда они встречаются в конце, нет ли какого-то разочарования в том человеке, которого она встречает вновь?
I think that Tatiana, the moment she sees Onegin, you know, when you have love at first sight, she falls in love with Onegin. She sees there is something aloof, you understand, aloof from Onegin, that she can grasp, and that fascinates Tatiana. So Tatiana dreams about Onegin, and when and she writes that letter to him, no, telling all in her innocence, she felt that he was going to return her love. But that's not the case. Onegin just laughs at her and makes that whole situation with her sister, with Lenski, that at the end becomes in that tragedy. And when Tatiana, at the end of the second act, it's one of the most beautiful moments in Onegin, when Onegin comes and he regretting that he caused all that, and he looks at Tatiana, and Tatiana just stands up, looks at him and says, "Get out of my life." But she always loves Onegin till the end. Till the last day that she stayed in this earth, her big love was Onegin. But once Onegin left, Prince Gremin is the one that stayed and helped her. So she's very loyal to Gremin. So when Sonny Onegin comes back, she could, run out with him, because the moment she saw Onegin, that feeling that she had the first day that she looked in the mirror and saw Onegin coming, was there. But she wasn't prepared to give up on the man that helped her, just to be again with Onegin. That's why one of the most difficult moments in Onegin is at the end, when Tatiana says to Onegin, "Go, just leave me alone." That Tatiana must be very careful not to make the audience think that she's sending away as revenge. It's not that. It's a question of she could go with Onegin immediately, but she's too loyal to her husband, and she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't do to her husband what Onegin did to her.
И в этой постановке Онегина, конечно, визуальный образ во многом создан Юргеном Розой, замечательным художником по костюмам и замечательным сценографом, потрясающим. А как с ним было работать? Он тоже создавал костюмы именно конкретно на вас, общаясь с вами? Или вы приходили, и все уже было готово и сделано?
No, Jürgen started with Cranko in Romeo and Juliet. That was the first work that they did together. And really, Cranko and Jürgen were like one person. And Jürgen first used to talk a lot with John, to know John's idea. Then he would go and design, and just the designs of Jürgen Rose, something that already when you see, you just want to put that here, and just the design is perfect. But then when you came in, Jürgen was very good with proportions, and this is the design, and then he would say, "Okay, but for you this has to be higher for you." For each one he would find what would fit best, and that's what Jürgen had that was incredible, was that to be able to see the shape of your body and to know exactly what fits you. With me, he was amazing. For Romeo, for Onegin, for initials, whatever he did with me, he knew exactly my body. He knew what made me look the best. He was, in that way, to work with the dancers, he was exactly like Cranko with the dancers. It's not that he says, "This is my design, and that flower has to stay here. If you look silly with that flower, he will take away. He will put something else or put somewhere else." That's what the two of them had that was so compatible.
Этот балет никогда не шел в России, сейчас впервые пойдет на сцене Большого театра. Как вы думаете, воспримет его русская публика?
Oh, I think they'll love it. They love it because they cannot help not loving it. Because that's one thing that Cranko had, is that every ballet he made, every country that we've been, they always love. And why? Because Cranko had a very special way to get in contact with the audience through his ballet. He always said, "If a child understands my ballet, that's what's important. So that means what he wanted is that the mass of people, they all open the curtain, you go in and you live. That he wanted the public to have the same experience that we were dancing on stage to have, you know, that they would be with us. And that's one thing that he always said to me. He said, Marcia, don't ever forget. That was Cranko that said, and also my first teacher, Velchek. He said, when the curtain goes up, the most important thing for the dancer is bring that whole audience with you, and if you make something sad, they must cry. If you make something funny, they must laugh. They must have the feeling that after 2.5 hours of seeing a performance, they were Tatiana or they were Onegin. They connect with the artist on stage. And that for him was the most important thing, was that contact that we dancers we would have with the public, so that the public could live with us what we were living on stage. And that wasn't all only for the principals, was also for the corps de ballet. He used to say the corps de ballet, you also telling the story. You're not just dancing and expecting that the principals, they are telling the whole story. You are part of the story. The reaction in the corps de ballet of each dancer is very important. If you look at Romeo and Juliet in the second act, and don't look at the principals, look at the corps de ballet, you're going to see that each one is part of that whole story. And that's what, those things were important for Cranko.
И это абсолютная правда, и Джону Кранко повезло, что рядом с ним была его муза Марсия Хайде, которая умела заставить публику всегда смеяться и плакать, и сопереживать ей. И продолжает это делать и сегодня, выступая на сцене Большого театра в роли мадам Капулетти. И я очень ей благодарна за то, что она нашла время и была с нами сегодня в «Зелёной гостиной». Спасибо большое.